Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Deontay Wilder, he's certainly not one to hold back, and he's gone all in this time on Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn in a sit-down interview with Behind the Gloves. So in what was a wide-ranging interview, the Alabama native, he spoke about his goals, going into acting, reaching 51-0, family, and of course he also spoke about the current negotiations for a fight with Anthony Joshua. And it's the last part that I'll get into in depth with his quotes, and then I'll follow up with a few thoughts because there's a lot to get into there. Buckle in. Let's go. So Michelle Joy Phelps asked Wilder about the various sides to this negotiation, sort of saying Joshua's side, Eddie Hearn's side, Shelley Finkel's side, and even his side, to which he responded, "Only one side, our side. I speak the truth, especially when dealing with a situation like this. It's obvious at this point. I mean, we don't really have to go into the small details because it's like the fine print on the contract. Now the fine print is starting to reveal to people as something big now. I've been saying this. I've said for 2 years now. I said Eddie is a manipulator, a contradictor, and he's a compulsive liar. Some people may have had their own opinions back then. Like anything I say, people are always going to go against it, and I always feel my swag I bring to the table. I'm not blunt, I speak it like it is. I don't have strings on me, I'm not a puppet. I'm not always politically correct. They can't tell me to say and what to do. They can't control me. Everybody know Deontay Wilder ain't afraid of no man. I'm very powerful. I ain't even talking about my right hand. My words are powerful. Why can I say certain things and it just comes to pass? People can see it for themselves, the smart people. Now only the people that are still going in with the narrative is AJ fans, and people that are just ignorant to the sport of boxing and don't do their own research. But at this point in time, everybody, it's clear to see they don't want to fight me. That they are the ones keeping this fight from happening. They are holding the fight up. Every time they come with something, I've agreed to everything they've done, and they haven't agreed to nothing I've done, because we know who wants it. I'm a true champion. If it takes me sacrificing a smaller reward for a greater reward in the future, then let's do it. So he don't know that we are both building our legacy, and what we do at this point, the story's going to be told. So the more they run, the more they look terrified of me, the more they keep dodging me. He building his legacy. This is going to be written in the books. To allow other people to allow him to turn down $50 million, that's a minimum. He would have made over $100 million. Then you're talking about a second rematch. That would have been over 175 to 200 million. I told AJ, you're going to regret that. We talked privately too. I tried to tell him certain things, but he should have played in that movie Keep Out. Because they got him, bruh. Joshua don't run his team like I run mine. He don't fight who he want to fight. They pick it for him. And then later he says, when you have a manufactured champion and you have a born champion, the hunger is two different things. He's made, I'm a born champion. And those two things don't mix. The one that's hungry, the one that's born, is always going to prevail, no matter what the situation is. This has definitely been a frustrating situation. I've seen all types of fear, but I've never seen fear like this in my life before. I know they are terrified of me. And just in relation to the $50 million counter offer, so Wilder stated, when we came up with the money, here it is. Now, you're not a stand-up guy no more. You're not a man of your word. Even the UK people, oh my God, I get hundreds of messages in my DM from UK people. They finally awake. They seen it. They understanding it. And in respect of Eddie Hearn's comments that Wilder had made them wait 4 weeks before agreeing to terms to fight Joshua, Wilder said, "Are you serious? How can I wait 4 weeks when you just said you've been talking to us every day?" We showed him and his team the funds of the 50 million. I think Joshua wants the 50 million. Okay, so that was Deontay Wilder. Some of his statements from the Behind the Gloves interview. It's over an hour long. Recommend watching it. Those were some of the juiciest bits from the first sort of 20 to 25 minutes. Do recommend you watch it, but there's certainly a lot to unpack. But what I'll do first, I'll start with some of the reaction from Eddie Hearn, because he's been hit up on Twitter with some of the quotes from it, and he's responded. So the first one: every time they've come up with something, I've agreed to everything. That's what Deontay Wilder said. So Hearn's response was, apart from the contract, which mirrors the terms you supposedly agreed to. In relation to the $50 million that Wilder told Joshua he will regret turning down, and which he said proof of funds had been provided, Hearn stated, they didn't show any funds. Also, on the 2 points which Wilder's co-manager Shelley Finkel told the media had not been addressed, Eddie Hearn said, the Winkle has been satisfied. And the Winkle is Shirley Winkle. That's the pet nickname that Eddie Hearn does have for Shelley Finkel. So 2 different names, but the Winkle has been satisfied according to Eddie Hearn. So make of Eddie Hearn's responses what you will. So I'll start by saying what I've been saying for months now, actually. Both sides are desperately trying to craft a narrative in the media that the other is being difficult and the other is the hold-up. In this interview, it had it in spades. Wilder went on and on about everything being Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn's fault, and that his version of events was the truth. And actually, to some extent, I'm sure that he probably believes most, if not all, of what he's saying is the truth. But let's face it, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that there's always 2 sides to every story, and especially in a messy situation like this, there's going to be blame on both sides. It's never just one side. So I don't believe for a second that either side is without blame in these negotiations and the reason they keep dragging on and on. On the dislike and distrust of Eddie Hearn, well, that's fair enough. You know, it's a rival promoter who's representing the A side in the equation. So, of course, Eddie Hearn, he wants to get one over on Wilder and his team because they think they can. And, you know, Deontay Wilder is going to be reacting to that accordingly. But, you know, let's face it, that's also just boxing, and it's been like that since forever ago. Your job now is to go in there, knock Joshua out, become the A side. And he actually did speak about that, saying he would sacrifice money for now to get more later. So if that's the case, sign the contract. We've got a fight for fans to look forward to. And it was very clear actually on the contract that any specifics regarding the contracts was off limits in this interview, and the conversation was steered away from it a couple of times. And in the circumstances, you know, that's a reasonable position because obviously, you know, it's a commercial negotiation now. There's sort of back and forth, nothing's been signed, nothing agreed to, no signatures on paper, all that sort of thing. But what I can't get away from was the repeated statements in this very interview that Anthony Joshua doesn't want to fight, that he wants to avoid him, that he wants to duck him, and so on and so forth. But the fact is, and it was even alluded to, there is now a contract in front of Deontay Wilder. Terms have been agreed, the contract was drawn up, it was sent, and the contract is now with Deontay Wilder and his people. I would have thought that's actually a very sort of deliberate signal that Joshua wants the fight. Wilder has agreed to terms. He's now got the contract. So it's those sorts of statements about Joshua doesn't want to fight. I can't reconcile those 2 things because it doesn't actually mesh with reality. But like I said, part of it is for positioning. And look at the situation right now. We've got this contract in front of Wilder, and the noise that had been around, it's largely died down. And what that has allowed is for Deontay Wilder to effectively say whatever he wants to publicly. And as a result, that will, because there's a bit of an information vacuum right now, it's going to get covered in the media and on social media. It's helping sell his name. And let's hope it's part of the pre-fight hype. The talk about the $200 million, $100 million, all that sort of stuff, it sounds good. But do we really have anything to quantify that? I mean, you can kind of stick a finger in the air and go, okay, it feels like about $100 million, but, I mean, do we really know? But I do take Wilder's point. Walking away from $50 million plus upside, you know, that's a hell of a thing. But you could also make the argument for Joshua, as Wilder did for himself, that Joshua is sacrificing now to make more later on. And from the sounds of it, they both are. So if Joshua, he was to lose both fights, well, then he may regret actually not taking the 50, but time will sort of prove all this and see how it plays out. Now, the manufactured claims. I'm sure that's going to rile some Joshua fans who I'm sure would claim the same about Deontay Wilder. But regardless of the arguments for both sides, we've got two champions here. They say they both want the fight, and then they can just prove who is better if they get in the ring if and when they meet. So when Wilder is waxing lyrical about these sorts of things, I actually find it very entertaining because he's a good talker, he's, very brash, he says things and you kind of go, well, do you really believe that? But actually, I think he does. He thinks his words are very powerful. And, he's well and truly drunk his own Kool-Aid on this sort of thing. And I actually thought when Wilder was saying he wasn't a puppet and that he picks his own opponents, that he actually did himself a slight disservice there. Because we now know who to ask about the opponents, those early championship defences against middling opposition that Deontay Wilder had. So those names, Molina, Spilka, Duhaupas, Areola. Guys that are okay, but guys we didn't really want to see him facing. So his argument, it kind of fails to stack up when he's talking about that sort of thing. When you look at Joshua's opponents, and they've included Klitschko, White, Takam, Parker, all of whom I believe would beat the four guys of Wilder's I just mentioned. And I only bring this up to make a point that when you try to discredit an opponent, you can leave yourself exposed to criticism. Even if Joshua wasn't picking his opponents, which he says he does do, he's still earning $15 to $20 million a fight. He's got multi-million-dollar sponsorship deals, arrangements, all that sort of thing. So it could be argued that whatever his formula is, it's a successful one, especially if you measure them up against Deontay Wilder. But some people will sort of go, oh, well, Deontay Wilder doesn't need money, don't worry about his money. But the fact is, he's talking about wanting to make his money later on. So clearly, money is a motivating factor. And I'm not going to believe that it's not. After all, they don't get into this fight game to, basically do it for free and do it for favours. Deontay Wilder wants to get paid as well. That's clear. He's even said as much, and he's willing to give up some now to get paid later on. So, if he does beat Joshua, he clearly becomes the A-side. But Wilder, he did land a few blows in the interview on Joshua, and the one in particular that stands out is that Joshua said he'd take $50 million, but then didn't. And Wilder said he's now no longer a stand-up guy, no more, not a man of his word. He said he'd take $50 million, and he actually even did say, let's roll, when it was offered. And that's hard to just explain away. And I'm sure some Joshua fans will say, oh, well, they only got 24 hours to make a call on it. But the fact it was offered and Joshua said, let's roll, they can't just sort of sweep that under the rug. That is a bit of a sticking point that's hard to explain away. But like I've said previously, a decent chunk of this negotiation, it's been about control. Control of the event, the logistics, revenue streams, and cribbing any little advantage that they can. Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua clearly want it in the UK. Deontay Wilder, he's now agreed to terms to fight in the UK. But he's got to sign the contract now. And he says Anthony Joshua is terrified of him. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But let's find out. Sign the contract so then we can find out. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.